Hello, dear viewers, and welcome to the showcase that you are about to see. Over the last 3 months or so I have been working on a digital painting of Sonic CD's Bad Future from the stage Palmtree Panic as a little side project. Today I want to show off the final result. But first, in case you don't know what Sonic CD is, I am of course talking about the hit video game released on the SEGA CD in the year 1993, even before I was born. In this video game you play as Sonic the Hedgehog, an immature rodent that is trying to stop the great evil genius Dr. Eggman, aka the guy that I am cosplaying as today, if you couldn't recognize that by now, from executing his scheme. This master plan consists of collecting these tiny rocks to gain full control over time itself. Fitting to this plot, the video game includes time travel mechanics, where the player is able to travel to present, past, bad future, where Eggman has successfully taken over the stage, and good future if certain actions were taken whilst playing through the stage. If you have watched my first video on this channel about the big painting I once did, you can probably guess which one of these 4 time zones I generally find the most interesting. Before I keep talking though, one disclaimer: I have actually never played Sonic CD. However, I am a big fan of the themes that this game is exploring, including the general stage design and the OST, especially the OST. So quite some time ago I thought, how could I get better at drawing digitally? How about drawing all of Sonic CD's Bad Future stages? Sounds to me like a pretty good idea. So here in this video I will show you my interpretation of Palmtree Panic's Bad Future, since it is the first stage you play in Sonic CD. I don't know if I'll do all the other stages in the future as well, because this one already took quite some time and I generally enjoy drawing on paper more, so yeah. We'll just see. Now, before finally talking about my drawing process, I want to quickly glance over the stage that I try to portray. Palmtree Panic, as the name suggests, or at least the first part of it kind of, originally consists of a lush green environment with palm trees, waterfalls and some of Dr. Eggman's robots in between. The present version seems to me like your typical first Sonic stage and kind of like your typical first video game stage in general. In the Bad Future version, however, the palm trees are replaced by some sort of mechanical counterparts, the water is polluted, the sky is turned into an evil shade of purple, and everything that could be put into a lush green category is gone. Some of those aspects I did incorporate into my painting. For the most part, however, I was just listening to the stage theme and imagining what a stage that sounds like this would look like. So you won't see a one-to-one recreation of the stage, but rather an interpretation of the song in my own art style and with some of the stage elements mixed in. Now we can finally get to work and talk about the drawing process. I first thought about the general structure of the entire thing before I got started. Since Sonic CD is a 2-dimensional, maybe pseudo-3-dimensional video game, my painting consists of multiple layers. Some of those are supposed to be the foreground, and the ones seemingly behind them are obviously the background. I started with a simple first draft for the layer that is closest to the front. As you can see, the floor is supposed to consist of little metal parts. On top of them, a tiny layer of grass can be seen. I also incorporated those halfway mechanized versions of palm trees on the left and on the right side to mix up the pattern. On the bottom you can see the water, which is coming out of some sort of sewage system beneath the ground. Once again, an element of the painting that is supposed to disrupt the metallic pattern and also serve as kind of a reference to the original stage. I also made sure that Sonic, this blue buffoon, can run across the ground with the construction things on the corners. However, as you can see, everything we have at this point still looks a bit boring, so I spice up the foreground a bit with adding in some extra details. There we go. Can you tell just how smart I am because I added in all those elements, huh? Some very important high voltage towers, some computing systems besides them with some pipework and a pole with some signs at the side and loudspeakers on top on the right side of the painting. I kinda like how the tech beneath the voltage towers looks like some ancient ruins. I was kind of worried that each layer might become too crowded, but I think I managed to achieve a nice balance. Now let's see how the entire thing looks like with color. So, what do you think? I went with gray for the metal floor, obviously, orange for the polluted water, as well as the sign with some yellow and purple outlines on the entire surface of the layer. These ones are especially important because they will make it easier to differentiate all the other layers later on. Also, if you look closely, you can see the slightest hint of green on the palm tree leaves and the grass. Believe me, I am trying my hardest to remove every last bit of nature, but I guess it's still a work in progress. And there you have it, the first layer done. I will move on to the next one now, without keeping the first layer on screen. For now, I want you to focus on each layer by itself. However, I will do a cool montage towards the end where I will merge all the painting elements together. For the next foreground layer, I just did more of what I did with the first foreground layer. If you were wondering where the cables were going on the first layer, they were connecting to the voltage towers on this one. Aside from that, not a lot of interesting stuff going on. I added another signpost, some voltage towers with tech beneath them, one more mechanized palm tree on the right side, everything else, and that's kind of it. I like the gap in the middle. I think that makes this layer a bit more interesting. With the coloring, I just did the exact same patterns that I used for the first foreground layer. Not really much to talk about. Let's just move on to my gorgeous industry plant. Oh, isn't it beautiful? Here, Eggman's industry palm tree plant does not only serve as a way to extract as much biological material from this region as possible, but also as the first background of the painting. I really like what I've managed to come up with. Let's start with the two smaller side structures next to the factory. As you can see, in the middle window, liquid is stored and possibly being used as fuel to get this entire building complex running. In the two windows next to the liquid, I just put some mishmash of mechanical gears. The highlight, however, is definitely the top. I have to put the palm trees of palm tree planting somewhere, and I think what fits the most with the theming and song in mind is them being in the background, currently burning to a crisp and being processed at very unclean energy. I like that you can still recognize the plants, but only barely, and with the fire as backdrop. This fire is coming from the main building, right in the middle of the painting. To me, this is quite the highlight and draws very quick attention to itself, as it should, since it has my face modeled on the very top. But let's start at the bottom. We have the same processing units that can be seen next to the voltage towers in the left and right window, with some railing, spikes and cables added in. In the middle window you can see some storage boxes and some loudspeakers. Maybe I could have come up with better things to put in the buildings, but I didn't want the entire thing to get too overwhelming, especially with all the layers we still have to add. What I really like about these structures is the pattern they have. Those curly lines on the main part of the buildings kind of look like DNA strings. They also create a nice contrast to the very spiky and sharp pattern on the top of each building. This pattern was very fun to come up with and draw, plus the result is obviously stunning. Makes it feel like the entire structure is sort of jumping out the canvas. The most iconic part of the building is obviously the upper part. Attached to the left and right are small mechanical arms with flamethrowers at the end. I think those make the building feel alive, whilst also giving it this kind of white feeling I want to achieve. Like if that darn blue hedgehog runs through the factory, it is just immediately going to collapse. which absolutely will not happen. Moving on to the top, which kind of looks like me. What a strange coincidence. Yeah, I just think the design is really cool, especially with the two voltage towers sticking out on the sides. And I like the diagrams on the monitor below because these sort of resemble an angry mouth. I like this design because it is not too organic, but you can still clearly see that this is supposed to be Eggman. Now that I explained the entire structure, it is time to add some color. Doesn't it look wonderful? The main color of the buildings is obviously red, what contrasts very sharply with the green and blue DNA pattern. Fun fact, whenever I was choosing a more natural color like blue or green, I always made sure that it was in sort of a nasty shade with being at least 20% gray colored. Now with this orange and yellow coloring, the spiky pattern is also really sticking out and achieving a very nice contrast to the evil purple outline that I once again added. The fire also creates a contrast, and the orange seems especially mischievous with the spiral pattern on the flames. With the Eggman part of the building, I think the coloring has been quite obvious. I think the coloring is especially well done on this part of the painting because of all the super sharp contrasts. The entire thing feels like it is out to get you, sort of the same feeling I had whilst listening to the song. Let us move on to create more things now. This is the final landscape layer of the painting, the second background part. I could have just went with more of the things you saw in the foreground, but that would be boring. No, we need something more Eggman-esque. For a practical example, what if the industry plant complex would just go on in the background and sort of tower above the stage? So that's what I settled on, and I really like the result. First, we have the two fuel towers on the left and on the right side, achieving a bit of contrast on the spaces that would otherwise just be filled with the repetitive building structure. I also think the smoke is very important to get some rounder lines in the entire thing. The buildings in the background are tall and menacing, but ultimately just serving as more fuel storage. Maybe if this was an actual stage, the buildings would break down and flood the stage at some point, turning it into water level. I think that would be kind of a neat idea. Around the buildings I added the spiky pattern that I am a huge fan of at this point. On top we have more fire and more palm trees because I didn't want the buildings to end with this rounded out shape, and because I wanted to add more burning plants. I think the entire thing just really comes together with some color, so let me press a bunch of buttons. And there we go. Stunning, right? My idea kind of was that the outlines on all the layers would add a lot of purple to the painting. And this heavy use of red, orange and maybe even yellow is supposed to kind of contrast that. When I think of Palmtree Panic Bad Future, I also mainly think of those colors for some reason, probably because the song and theming just make me think of fire and overbearing heat. Speaking of, we have a setting sun in the background. I thought it would look cool, especially with the Eggman part of the industry plant being right beneath. In the original version of the stage, the sky has this sort of purple shade, but I think a menacing red is fitting much better for the occasion. I also like how all the background elements are sort of obstructing the view, with the buildings being this sort of wall blocking out every last bit of nature that could possibly be behind them. When it came to painting the sun, I thought just doing the colors would be too boring, so I added, I don't know if you can see that, let me just... There we go. Yeah, I decided to fill the whole thing up with this sort of ancient writing pattern that can also be found on the computing units. Why? Because I am a scientific genius, why not? I was hoping that using this pattern would enable me to do a sort of color transition in the middle part of the sun. Kind of worked, but not as well as I would have liked. So, those are all the landscape elements finished, but those haven't been all the layers I added to the painting. I don't know about you, but I think this whole stage is lacking some partially mechanized life. Magnificent! Doesn't everything feel much more dynamic already? Yeah, so I decided to add in some PCs and NPCs to spice up the landscape a bit. The characters I added consist of some characters from the Sonic franchise and 3 types of evil Eggman robots that I designed. I tried positioning all those life forms in a way that they would fill out spaces in the painting where there wasn't much going on, and I also made sure that the placement of the characters does somewhat make sense. For example, I made sure that Sonic was not just floating in the air. Speaking of my arch nemesis, let's take a little bit of a closer look. I tried establishing a solid art direction for all the characters in this sort of minimalist cartoon style. Even though I despise this hedgehog, I like the pose that he is doing. Now, let's add the color. I had 2 difficulties when it came to drawing the characters. First, since they are supposed to be quite small in the painting, I unfortunately had to leave out some details. But I also had to ensure that despite them being drawn small and minimal, you could recognize them from afar and pretty much immediately. The way I tried to solve the last issue was with some outlines fitting to the color representing each character. Maybe Sonic is a bit too blue because of that, but at least you can recognize that it's him. Of course, you can recognize that it's him. You would recognize this stupid piece of blue organic matter anywhere. Anyway, when it comes to the first issue, characters being too minimal, I just had to go with the flow and kind of see what I could do. I know what you're thinking, I know. Tails, the annoying sidekick of Sonic, cannot be found in the original Sonic CD game, fortunately. But I guess he also ended up in this painting, probably because whoever drew this, definitely not me, felt like also adding him in. I think he looks pretty good. The pose was difficult to get right, but I think I managed to do so. I was kind of scared that his color scheme wouldn't draw much attention in front of the orange and yellow colored background. I think it definitely isn't optimal, but wait, let me just pull up the colored version. The white coloring and the red shoes definitely help him stick out a bit. And I also chose a friendlier shade of orange for him than for the liquid stored in the buildings behind him. Yes, Knuckles is also not in Sonic CD, I know. This is getting more and more ridiculous. Who put all these Sonic characters in here? Anyway, I think Knuckles is suffering the most from this minimal art style, especially when it comes to the coloring. Let's just switch over to that immediately. Unlike Sonic and Tails, he doesn't have that many color accents mixed in, and it really doesn't help that his shoes are also mostly red. He kind of looks like he's wearing an expensive jumpsuit. I also couldn't add red to the hair thingies Knuckles has around his head, so the entire thing just looks a little weird. But I think he is still recognizable, especially in front of landscape that doesn't have the same color as his body. Oh, and I probably should have also added Amy or Metal Sonic 2. I honestly just sort of forgot, despite I think especially Metal Sonic is super cool, but yeah, just forgot. I'm very sorry. I promise if I make another painting like this, I will add them both in. Okay, those were the good guys. Now we move on to the bad guy. I mean the characters with the more scientifically reasonable interests in mind. We start with the first type of robot I built to help maintain order around my industry plant in Palmtree Panic. I didn't really give these robots names, I just labeled them as enemy type 1, 2 and 3, but I guess you can make out what sort of real-life animal this design is leaning onto. A firefly, or maybe just a normal fly in general, in this case at least. When I draw machines, I really enjoy drawing eyes like these ones, and I also think the 2 small propellers on top are super cool. It also got a little sting on the bottom. Oh, and in case you are following my RSRS Random Songs Random Story series, I hope you are, this design inspired me for the general theme of the protagonist I have right now. In case you don't know, I am talking about the fly theming. So, yeah, I really like this one, especially with some color added in. Maybe the digital paint is a little bit too dim, but it just makes those menacing red eyes stick out even more. Okay, next one. Look at that, a beautiful caterpillar that is able to fly. Wrong, this obviously is the second type of machine I designed to keep some sense of order and efficiency going around here. I came up with the idea when I thought about what animals might be harmful to palm trees and plants in general, and thought of the humble caterpillar. Why can it fly? I don't know, but it looks silly and fun. Hopefully that's justification enough. With the color I added a more friendlier pattern this time. I think with the frowny face of the robot it makes it seem like it's designed to be here, but just doesn't really want to. Maybe you can't recognize immediately that this is supposed to be a robot. I was hoping that the grey wings would resolve that. You can decide for yourself if they do. Now for the final robot design, I wanted something that is active on the ground, not in the air. Since the whole painting is themed around burning palm trees, I thought a robot type that would help spreading the wildfires would be quite unique. I came up with this design, sort of a tank with some spikes and a flamethrower. If this was an actual in-game enemy, you could only attack it from rolling into the tank on its back, since the spikes avoid an attack from the top and the flamethrower avoids an attack from the front. Since this robot is on the ground where there is already a lot of stuff, I'm speaking of the voltage towers and computing units, I wanted to choose a main color that makes it easy to see. Since this is partially a tank, I decided to go for a shade of military green as its main color. I think it looks pretty good, and it is fun that the only sort of natural green on the painting can be found on a robot that is throwing flames. And finally, to conclude this segment, we have me, or the character I am cosplaying as, in all his glory. Dr. Eggman is looking slick as always. The easy part of drawing him was the body, since the round shape is quite easy to get onto digital paper. Since this is quite the detailed character, I had to compromise a bit, but I think it still looks fine. Also, I don't really know what he's supposed to be doing with his arm that isn't leaning on his machine. Maybe he's doing a sort of halt sign toward some of his machines, or maybe he's just like flipping off Sonic. Now, the difficult part of drawing him was the machine that he's using to fly around. I looked at a lot of references online. Maybe I should have gone with a more classic design, but I just ended up mixing them together and making my own. We have one light, some warning stripes, two propellers, two railguns, and a jet engine producing flames at the bottom. I think it generally looks pretty cool. Now we also have the color added in. Did you know that the chair that Dr. Eggman is sitting in is often depicted as being blue, at least in some of the photos I found? Seems kind of weird to me. I think this soft shade of red behind him is a better fit. I was also afraid of adding the outlines, since Knuckles is also colored in red. However, I just ended up darkening the color tone a bit and making it more evil that way. I think it worked out pretty well, and I like the cheeky horns I added with the outline as well. Unfortunately, I had to compromise a bit, so I couldn't color the glasses in dark blue, but I think it is ultimately fine. Before we move on to the final layer, here's just a quick overview of all the characters with color added. Okay, done. Next video segment. Yeah, I will just start with the colored version immediately. Okay, so when you start a stage in a Sonic game, there usually pops up some text telling you how the stage is called, what version you are playing, etc, etc, etc. Since I really enjoy that idea in video games in general, I also wanted to add something like that, some text boxes. On the top left you can see the full stage name. Palmtree Panic, colored in beautiful shade of green, resembling the lush origin of the level and in large size, since this ultimately still is the stage that you are playing. Beneath that, with evil purple blue background and a swirly pattern, we have the bad future text, since this is the version we are supposedly playing right now. And beneath that we have the customized stage name that I decided to give the stage, Eggman's Industry Palmtree Plant, with the same spiky pattern I used around the buildings, since that was kind of the thing I like the most of all the things I do. And I think this is also quite recognizable, since the pattern really jumps out at you. On the bottom right we have the more general aspects of the stage. Poisoned F X Sonic CD, since I made this painting interpreting a stage that ultimately comes from the video game Sonic CD. For my name I just went with two shades of colors I really like, and for Sonic CD I went with a grey and blue theme. Blue because Sonic, and grey because of the industrial theming that the game is exploring. And there you have it, every aspect of the painting being done and shown to you in its singularity. In total, this painting has 6 layers if you don't count the extra layers I added for coloring separately. And now the part that you have been waiting for. All of the parts, all of the layers put together, showing the beautiful glory of my interpretation of Sonic CD's bad future from the stage Palmtree Panic. Just gotta push some buttons, pull some levers, and hit it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Your applause is very much appreciated. You are clapping right now, right? I hope you are, because this painting is the result of an IQ higher than you can ever imagine, tons of biological resources, fuel, energy cores, explosives, funding from the government, scientists backing my projects, and lots of hard work. Well, not really, I just sort of did this thing as a little side project during the last few months. It actually wasn't that hard to do, a lot of it just comes down to having the capacity of coming up and drawing some repetitive patterns. But yeah, I am pretty proud of the result. I hope I was able to do the original stage, the theming, the song justice. Before you leave a like, subscribe to my channel, write a comment, recommend me to at least 3 other people that you know, and ultimately exit this video. I also added in some CRT effects to see how that would look like. Since Sonic CD was originally meant to be played on the SEGA CD, you would have some visual noise going on over the gameplay. CRT basically means the visual distortion you would have on some very old cubic televisions. I tried to look for a specific picture filter emulating the SEGA CD experience. However, I couldn't find any, probably because you can play games with the console on several models of television with several different CRT effects. However, I did find a website that lets you add and customize the CRT filters to your pictures. Link is in the video description. I kind of just played around with the sliders for a bit and added the effect that I thought would be best suited for my painting. I have the filter on the basic version with just the landscape, the version with characters, but without writing, and the final version with everything. I am just going to show you how they look. So, what do you think? Does CRT make my painting look better? I personally sadly don't think so. Maybe if I specifically painted something with the idea of adding the filter later in mind, it would look a bit better. I like how some of the colors change and blend together because of the filter though. I think that is pretty cool. And there you have it. The showcase of the entire thing is now done. I don't think I will do more paintings like this one in the future, despite me finding it quite fun. I just like painting analog even more, and this one painting already took way longer than I thought it ever would. Plus, I usually prefer coming up with more original ideas. But I guess we'll see, maybe one day I will make a painting of every bad future in the game. Making this video was also a lot of fun because I got to be more creative with video and editing techniques. If you are curious about the PNG tuber I used, I utilized a platform called VerdoTube for that. It was honestly pretty easy to set up, even for someone who usually is really bad with technology like me. So if you want to do a video similar to this one, feel free to make your own avatar. I will probably put a link to the VerdoTube website in the video description. Definitely a big recommendation for me. For drawing, I used the free platform Krita. I really like this one. I also did the drawing tutorial in the video about my magnum opus painting on this platform. The layout is quite overwhelming, but if you find out where all the important features are, it is not that difficult to use. When I draw something on Krita, I mostly use the very basic functions this platform has to offer, and as you can see, I still get pretty good results. So yeah, if you're looking for a free high quality drawing app, use this one. Now, if you are still watching, I just want to quickly say that you can use all of my art however you want, even without crediting me, or all the art I post on this channel at least. I will probably also write that down in the video description. I am doing this for fun as a hobby, and I don't plan to ever make any money off of it. And also no AI has been used in this video. Maybe you might have thought that my voice was like AI or something, but no, I am quite capable of doing pretty good voice acting, I'd say. So yeah, quite proud of it. And yeah. Okay, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, and oh wait, I'm getting an emergency call from Robot Unit 4209F. What? They are already here? Okay, that's quite bad. What about our line of defense? What do you mean the buildings weren't stable enough? I made those buildings. Okay, stop talking, that's it. I'm going in myself. I know just the thing that will finally stop them. Prepare my egg fryer. Yes, the egg fryer, please. No, not the pen, the robot. Stop talking already, start preparing. That will finally stop that blue rodent and all his immature friends. Oh damn, they are fast. Okay, gotta go. Once again, thank you for being here. And how do I turn this blasted thing off right now?